Hi everyone, I'm just pausing for a moment to wait for the numbers that we're expecting to come into the webinar. Please hold fire for those that are already on. We are expecting over 200 participants tonight. We're just up to around 79, 80 participants at the moment. Okay, looks like we've got the numbers. Not quite the numbers we were expecting, but certainly a good number. Okay, I'll make a start. Kia ora koutou, talofa lava, good evening. I'm Michael P, Chief Executive of the Pharmacy Council. Thank you so much for making the time available tonight. We really appreciate it. We hope you're tucked up warm somewhere in front of a great screen. Sorry about the image. We regret not being able to visit and be in the same room with you as was intended pre-COVID, but we hope that giving you a chance to hear a summary is a reasonable compromise. Most we regret that due to this approach, we are not able to take your questions directly now, but rather only through the Q&A facility and emails. Some of you who have already sent questions will hear them addressed this evening. It is exciting to introduce a new recertification framework that is planned to be effective from 1 April 2021. Exciting because Council introduced the current requirements that are implemented or delivered through the Enhanced program way back in 2012. So it is timely and therefore exciting that we are now talking about a new recertification framework. Recertification requirements help assure the public that pharmacists are competent as expected under the Health Practitioners Competence Assurance Act 2003. Jane Magini, our Manager of Qualifications and Competence Assurance, has been leading this work that has been underway for just over a year now. She has worked with a group of practicing pharmacists, including hospital, community, locum, rural, urban, patient-facing and non-patient-facing, and from different levels of seniority and management to get requirements that are workable for a range of pharmacists. The current requirements have served their purpose, but we are seeing internationally and locally that a better approach is possible, moving from a pure focus on learning to taking actions that are more closely connected to competence for each pharmacist's own role. I will hand over to Jane shortly and let her provide you with some more details. But I'd just like to make a few little emphasis notes. Please appreciate that Jane is introducing the framework. And although it is in a final draft, we will be seeking feedback through a survey. And so there may still be some changes. And most tonight, please appreciate there is more guidance and implementation detail to work through and to tell you about over the coming months. So it's nothing more than an introduction. The presentation does not have all the guidance detail. Our development group of pharmacists have welcomed the new requirements. I hope you will also welcome them. We look forward to your feedback and support as we begin to work on the operational guidance, technology, and transitional arrangements. Over to you, Jane.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Just get started here. So some of you will be hearing the new requirements described for the first time tonight, and others will have already read the document on our website and will be hoping for answers to your questions tonight. So I will do my best to incorporate answers to common questions as we go along. This is an introduction. As Michael said, we have several tasks yet to complete before the framework will be ready to go. First step has been to create the requirements, the framework. So that's tonight's topic. Just before we begin, we do want to know your questions. They tell us what we need to explain better and where there might be misunderstandings, where we need to focus some guidance, and also where there might be some issues that we still need to resolve. So to ask a question, email me. This is my email address on the screen. Apologies for an error in it in the email we sent out last Friday. This is correct. Alternatively, type them as we go tonight using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will be recording this session and we will capture those questions even though we are unable to answer them as we go along tonight. Answers to many will turn up in the Q&As document on the Council website, so that's a document we'll keep updating. This talk will take in the order of 30-40 minutes and we do, as I said, plan to make a recording and upload it onto our website so that if you want to listen again or you know somebody who couldn't make it tonight or last night, it'll be there for you to listen again. So why the change? Why are we changing the requirements? Council introduced its existing requirements in 2012 and it is time to review them in light of current thinking about what makes a difference to competence. We started on this work over a year ago because we want to do better in fulfilling our responsibilities under law to the public, assuring them that pharmacists do what they need to do to stay competent in their many roles and responsibilities throughout their careers. The thinking about what part recertification plays in supporting and assuring professional competence has evolved in the 8 years towards more effectiveness and efficiency even. So when we talk about recertification, we're talking about our process of issuing you with a practicing certificate each year. A current practicing certificate tells the public that we consider you good to go to practice for another year. Up until now, we've asked pharmacists to do some learning and Council has taken participation in that learning as a proxy for staying competent. So compliance with the existing framework comes mainly from accrual of points across single years, 3-year cycles, and from categories Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, and specific competency requirements. You'll be very familiar with those. It does have a complexity to it, and we thought it was probably time to think about something simpler as well. So the thinking of progressive regulators is that we should no longer be relying on learning by itself or on its own as a proxy for competence of a profession. So while we were working through this development, we held some principles to guide us in our thinking. The first, and it's always been a principle throughout the frameworks that Council has employed, is that pharmacists are accountable for their own competence. Nobody else is going to be held accountable for a pharmacist's competence, and that does include verifiers. We are not going to hold verifiers accountable for pharmacists' competence, so please, please be assured on that, and we'll talk more about the verifying pharmacists later tonight. Competence is specific to a pharmacist's role in their work setting. So competence for a junior pharmacist looks a little different to pharmacy manager, hospital, community, prescriber, locum, academic, industrial, advisor. It really is a long list. Each pharmacist is responsible for interpreting the competence standards and demonstrating the appropriate level of each competence for their own role. We also want to embed trust much more in this new framework. One place this is going to be evident is that we're not going to check your statements of compliance as you make your applications for a new practicing certificate. We'll accept them as true, and all other things being equal, you'll get your practicing certificate pretty much right then. So you may not be aware, but there is currently a pause as we check your claim against the enhanced points record. And that's not to say there won't be an audit later, but we're taking you at your word. We do believe that the vast majority of pharmacists are competent and professional and bring about great outcomes for the users of their services. We also believe that for the most part, you know exactly what you need to do to practice at the peak of your role. The public want to be sure its trust in the profession is well placed, and it wants to know that there's some evidence behind the assurances that Council makes about the profession. It is, of course, impossible to evaluate everyone's competence. It probably wouldn't be valid if we did, and it's unrealistic to expect a regulator to do that, and it's certainly not within our means to do so. So that being the case, we thought about what actions would signal that competence was being actively maintained, and what would good evidence or verification of those actions look like. The tasks you undertake for recertification have to be relevant to your everyday work. We can't check relevance for every pharmacist, so we need someone else involved who does understand a pharmacist's work. All we need from that other pharmacist is their comfort that activities have been relevant to your role. Another principle is that if we ask you to do something, it should be something that's likely to make a positive difference to competence. Of course, evidence should exist to support the statements that pharmacists make to us. The public expects that, and as always, we will conduct an audit of evidence. Finally, a straightforward, easy to record set of requirements is what we're aiming for. Quality, not quantity. Practicing pharmacists have had a say in this framework. In July 2019, after we advised the profession in our newsletter that this work was underway, we asked a group of practicing pharmacists to help create requirements that would work for many types of pharmacists. Discussions were lively, lots of ideas were shared and tested, and some discarded because they weren't practical for one group or another, or they were unnecessarily complicated, or they wouldn't achieve the desired goal. So reasonableness and achievability for busy pharmacists were values that were held dear by that group. With the help of that group, we have requirements now that are simpler, they're doable for pharmacists working in all environments, and they're in line with international thinking about staying competent. So, where do you record your activities, and what about enhance? As part of the change to the new framework, the Council will be looking at the best and easiest way for you to document online evidence you've met the requirements. Our first priority has been developing the framework itself, and tonight's talk is about that. Our next priority will be how pharmacists record their activities. We'll provide more information about that once the work on technology has progressed further. Enhance is the Council-approved online platform and support service provided by the Pharmaceutical Society for implementation of the existing Council requirements. In 2012, when Council finalised the current requirements, it wanted a provider to supply the technology and support for those requirements. It invited expressions of interest from the market, and several organisations did express interest. Of those, the Society successfully progressed through the procurement process to be the approved provider. We're separating the technology from support this time, but like last time, we're using a formal process to invite interest and proposals from qualified providers to supply the technology. So technology for the new framework will need to meet specifications that are different from the existing platform. And Council anticipates that several providers, including the Society, may be interested in engaging in its formal procurement process. Documents providing opportunities for registering interest were sent out today. So what is it that pharmacists will be asked to do? We'll ask pharmacists to do things that have a positive impact on competence. We want recertification to be efficient for you. It'll be fine for one activity to satisfy more than one of the 6 categories. It's also fine to meet a council requirement through actions that you've already undertaken recently for another purpose, as long as it fits. The goal again is that they're reasonable, appropriate, and achievable for any pharmacist role. So these requirements are completed and documented within a 12-month period, the recertification year. So we're no longer going to have a 3-year cycle, and there'll be no points to count. So very briefly, here are the 6 things we're going to ask you to do. Write a reflective statement, which is a reflection about applying a competence standard in your work or about a critical event you've experienced. Reflections can be helpful in processing and moving on from a difficult work event. Create a professional development plan, created near the start of the year and leading to a plan for improvement. So there's already an expectation of a professional development plan in the current requirements. 2 professional development cycles that address goals in your plan. These might be similar to Group 3, but shorter to allow completion within 12 months. They function as quality improvement cycles for competence. Next, an activity towards culturally safe practice. And the goal here is to progress through cultural competence, which is knowledge and understanding, towards cultural safety in all professional interactions. And the activity you select for this category will move you along in your journey towards cultural safety. We'll also ask that you attend at least 2 meetings, each with 4 or more professional peers. And the purpose of these meetings is to reduce isolation. So it might be geographic isolation, but it might also be professional isolation if you're the only pharmacist in your workplace. So the purpose here is to reduce isolation and share successes, mistakes, case studies, published research and innovations. So it can be a number of different formats, and as we know, meetings can be online or in person. And lastly, keeping up to date, which pharmacists do intuitively anyway, keeping up to date with medicines, technology, professional practice and services. So that helps ensure optimal outcomes for the users of your services. So we'll provide guidance, and where appropriate, examples will be provided to help pharmacists understand what's required. So just to recap, 6 types of activities within a 12-month recertification period focused on maintaining skills and knowledge and attributes for your own role. No counting of points or hours. We're simply asking pharmacists to show us they're taking actions that we know will help support their competence. At APC renewal time, so that's March, a pharmacist will apply online as usual for their practicing certificate. They'll confirm to council they've met these requirements. They'll declare they're competent for their role. We think each pharmacist should be able to make that declaration to us. And as well, they'll name their verifying pharmacist and confirm that that verifier has made their statements in the pharmacist's own online record. So now we're going to introduce a new role. In the current framework, we have 2 pharmacist roles. We have the pharmacist and the learning peer. We'll have 2 roles again in the new framework, but the second one is different to a learning peer. This role supports a pharmacist to be compliant with the requirements, and the existence of the role and the interaction between the 2 pharmacists helps improve the public assurance that council can make about the profession. Council wants to be confident that pharmacists' professional development aligns to the work they do. And so for evidence purposes, we need someone else to help give us that confidence, because council cannot know the specifics of 3,800 pharmacist roles. So that other person will be another pharmacist who will verify for council that activities have been relevant to your work role. We're calling this other person a verifying pharmacist or a verifier. After reading the pharmacist's online record and having had 2 chats with them during the year, the verifier will confirm that activities have been relevant to the pharmacist's work. So just to emphasise an earlier point, council is not going to hold a verifier accountable for another pharmacist's competence. And we really do not want anyone to feel anxious about that. The fact of the connection between the pharmacist and their verifier is what helps council strengthen its assurance. So we do understand that some pharmacist managers who are verifiers for their employees, which we imagine will be the case often, some of those managers might be comfortable stating that their employee pharmacist is competent for their role. They do, after all, have an invested interest in their employees' competence. So what we're going to do is give them the opportunity to say that, but only if they want to. We will not be concerned if managers don't want to make that statement. That's fine. No assumption will be made, no inference will be taken about either individual if that statement's not completed. Overall though, we think that our assurance about the competence of the profession as a whole will strengthen through time if the numbers of such statements increase, but that's all. Again, we don't want that to be a point of anxiety. It's an option. So every practicing pharmacist will have a verifying pharmacist. We do understand that some pharmacists have niche or unique roles and have concerns that they would perhaps find it hard to find somebody who is sufficiently familiar with their role to be their verifier. And we don't intend for that to be overly difficult. So as a result of that concern being raised, we will make sure the wording includes phrases like ideally or as far as practicable. Really the important thing is that they're able to talk to you about your role and develop an understanding of the parts of your role that involve practicing as a pharmacist. So who can be a verifying pharmacist and what do they have to do and how does a pharmacist get one? A pharmacist will invite an experienced pharmacist, and by experience we just mean someone who's not brand new to the scope of practice. So a pharmacist will invite an experienced pharmacist who's familiar with their type of practice to be their verifying pharmacist. For some, their verifier might be their workplace manager if that person's a pharmacist. For others, the verifier will be an experienced peer from a similar pharmacy practice situation. Many experienced pharmacists will be verifiers for others, and some will be verifiers for several pharmacists, we anticipate. And 2 experienced pharmacists may be verifiers for each other. That's fine too. Council encourages you to accept an invitation to be a verifier. We want you to enjoy supporting your colleagues and peers and assisting in providing public assurance. By our calculation, the actual time involved might be similar to being a learning peer. So the role shouldn't be viewed as an additional burden, we think. Verifiers are expected to engage in good faith in the process, but again, they're not accountable for the competence of anybody else. And they're not being asked by council to evaluate the competence of another. If you're an experienced pharmacist and you agree to be a verifier for another pharmacist, you'll be able to view their online record for the current year. You'll be in contact with your pharmacist to check a plan has been made to enhance knowledge and skills. and to see that the professional development activities do line up with the pharmacist's goals and their role. Pharmacists will make their own decisions about who to invite to be a verifier. Once a pharmacist has completed requirements for the year and has had at least 2 conversations with their verifier, at that point the verifying pharmacist is able to complete the statements in the pharmacist's online record. They will confirm that they've read the entries, they've had at least 2 conversations about activities that have been recorded, and to the best of their knowledge, the pharmacist has taken appropriate actions to remain competent for their role and work setting. We will, of course, provide guidance for the role of verifier and for the relationship between the two, including how to manage different situations, like when a pharmacist changes jobs, for example, or when the relationship just isn't working out. So no one should feel they must continue in a relationship that's not working out. Either party can release themselves from it, and the pharmacist simply invites somebody else. So a reminder that Council will not use the new framework to make competence judgments about individuals. The question this framework answers is, can we give better assurance to the public that the profession as a whole is remaining competent and is worthy of their trust? That is what the law says recertification requirements should do. So there are 3 parts to the framework. We've spoken about the pharmacist actions, the verifying pharmacist actions, and Council plays a part also. We set the requirements, obviously. We'll also monitor how the framework is going. And as we do now, we'll audit the records of a sample of pharmacists to check that the documentation supports the pharmacist's statement of compliance. We'll also follow up with pharmacists who've not complied, who've not met these requirements, and of course, any who make false declarations to us. So this has been an introduction. I have tried to include information along the way that answers some of the common questions we've already received. But please be aware that some details are not yet known. We are really pleased to introduce this framework. It is simpler, it focuses on the things that make a difference to competence, and it works for any pharmacist role. It's in line also with what other progressive regulators are thinking and doing. Most importantly, it gives better assurance to the public of the profession's competence as a whole. We've tried to make it simple and effective for you too. So for more information, the framework is in a document on our website. We've also started to publish answers to common questions, and we will invite your feedback before finalising the framework. This will be by way of a survey, and a link to that will come out in June or July. More information will be made available as we work through the next steps. Our next priority is to work through the formal procurement process for the technology and to begin development of guidance and support. So please do keep an eye on the Council website for more information and keep the questions coming. Thank you again and good night. I'll hand over to Michael.
Thanks, Jane. Really appreciate that. Thanks everybody for joining in tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time to do so. We appreciate everybody's extremely busy at the moment in these extremely unusual times. We do hope that this forum or mechanism is of use to you. Some feedback on that would be useful to us as well. This is the first time we've tried this forum or mechanism for communicating to people. We are feeling like it is reaching everybody a lot easier. It's obviously hopefully minimising your travel time and enabling you to stay warm and dry somewhere. Thank you for taking the time. As Jane has emphasised, your questions are really important to us. We are making really great use of them, and they will, in particular, I can see tonight, a lot of questions that have come through that are useful in respect to our forming of the guidance document and the guidance material. Some really good questions that we can appreciate we will need to give some guidance on. Really good, very focused and very useful. So thank you all, take care, keep warm, hopefully you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you once again for taking the time, and keep an eye out for the survey and those Q&As on our website. Thank you, take care, mā te wā.